Good afternoon. Thought I'd pull up a bucket and have a chat to you guys about habituation, desensitization, and incidental, accidental sensitization sometimes, and how, without quite realizing and how we approach things differently, we can go and end up with the wrong thing. So obviously desensitization is a very common practice, and what it aims to do is expose horses to lots of different stimulus to basically reduce the likelihood of an overt, aversive or uncontrollable response to it effectively. And obviously these are sensitive flight animals, so that could be getting a fright, spookiness, dermal sensitivity, so not liking the touch of something on them, or even bolting, kicking, anything that might not be a tolerant relaxed response or a tolerant still response, even if it isn't relaxed in many situations, is often what is desired. Now that's desensitization. That is reducing the horse's capacity to have a sense of agency over reacting in a way that might help it resolve that stimulus effectively. And the outcomes of that can be basically that the horse is then non-reactive at all. So it doesn't either know what it needs to do or just doesn't react at all effectively. Habituation can be very similar, but habituation has more of a sense of relaxation to it. So the horse knows that there is no need to respond because it isn't an aversive stimuli. So it isn't something that's likely to threaten it. So there is no need to react in a way. And usually that leads to relaxation because there's no need to respond at all. So it is quite a clear, direct route to what the horse needs to do. The problem is, in these situations, is how we approach the exposure to the stimulus. Now, it's all very well and good to basically say, okay, this horse needs to be exposed to many stimulus to be desensitized and be bomb-proof or to be appropriately prepared for the world it lives in. But at the same time, if we're only providing that stimulus, and it's a stimulus we can control, because obviously there's some things that we can't control, right? The whole world exists around us. We're the center of our world, but we're not the center of everyone else's world. So there will be things we can't control, but there are a lot of things we can control and a lot of things we can provide the horse, which then later can almost piggyback or be very similar to, which can allow us to stimulus blend into situations where it might be out of our control. So how do we approach it when we've actually got control over what we're actually going to provide the horse in the way that it might habituate or be desensitized to those stimulus? And that can be a number of different things. It can be a tactile stimulus, so it can be something that the horse feels. It can be something that the horse feels and hears, such as a pair of clippers. It can be a visual stimulus as well as a tactile stimulus, such as a big ball, for example. It can be a visual stimulus, an audible stimulus, as well as a tactile stimulus, such as a flag that could be flapping, making noises in the wind and touching the horse's body, as well as doing erratic movements. How we use these can really define the difference between desensitization, habituation, or accidental sensitization. And it comes down to our approach and the use of them all the time. So if it is something that we can control, what we really need to do is aim to basically be using that new stimulus or using that interesting thing or that tool, let's call it a new stimulus, in a way that shows the horse the correct response to it. Horses learn by having the response remove the pressure. So if the horse is choosing the wrong response, and in many situations where we're wanting desensitization and habituation to occur, that is basically the wrong response would be moving their legs and getting a fright, then what we need to do is make sure we're using it in a way that the horse isn't likely to exhibit those behaviors. The issue is horses have an amazing capacity to know how far they are from something, and the timing between how far they are from something, if that has gotten bigger, and if that stimulus has diminished in how concerning it is to them. Generally for a horse, the further away it is, the happier it is, basically, if it's an aversive stimulus. So we have to be really mindful that we're actually not setting the horse up for a situation where they can actually move themselves away from it, basically. And we need to then basically make it a situation where the horse is comfortable with that stimulus eventually. So it's presented to it in ways that it can cope. It isn't too aversive in stimulus. It is able to maintain the correct response, so it is not running in a circle till it stops. It's not moving its limbs till and being followed by the stimulus until it gives up and stops. But it is standing still in a way that it is able to cope with the stimulus being provided to it. And there's many different techniques and ways that we can do that. Sometimes we need to stimulus blend, so it needs to actually be a different, familiar, comfortable, enjoyable stimulus that's happening at the same time as well as the new thing. And that thing can be food. That's a stimulus blending. And that's also a positive reinforcement because it adds that positive kind of association to the new thing. So we do need to control how much the stimulus is being provided. If we don't, we run the risk of basically the horse forming a negative, even stronger negative association to the actual new stimulus than we wanted them to. The last thing we want the horse to do is be approached by something that's new, such as a nice big flag, have some curiosity, but also then get a little bit overwhelmed, remove itself quite rapidly from the flag, for example, and then convince itself, because it is a horse that, well, that was very successful, running away is the right response, so it must be an aversive or dangerous stimulus, because that's what a horse will do. And probably the last most important one to take away that I see most commonly executed either in real life or in that magical land of social media, which provides us with lots of opportunities to have opinions, is that are we providing it in a way which the horse then has the opportunity to process it not being a threat? Or are we just providing in a way that the horse is getting a fright, and then before the horse has had the opportunity to process that threat, we have removed the stimulus? An example of this is what I often see is when people are joking around and they're jumping up into the air and the horse has gotten a fright, it's still in fright response, and they've relaxed and they've moved on to another movement. The problem is the horse isn't really getting enough repetition of that to basically understand that that was not a threat. Particularly if this occurs time and time again with lots of different stimulus. So one day they might wave a saddle blanket at it. Another day they might throw a ball in the air. Another day they might attach something to the back of the saddle. Another day they might, ride them past a new flag that they've put somewhere. And if this keeps changing all the time and the repetitions aren't enough frequency and presented in an appropriate enough way for the horse to slowly learn that it is a neutral stimulus and not something that does provide threat, then all it's going to do is start to develop a situation where when new stimulus arrives into its environment, it's likely to have a flight response in the horse, such as an aversive spook kind of response, attention, and this is going to leave the horse in a state where it's persistently elevated into a nervous system response, which is in the sympathetic drive, which is not at all what we need with a horse that is generally habituated, able to learn, that leads to relaxation in its environment. So it's really important that when we're presenting the horses with this opportunity to become familiar with aversive stimulus that we think that they might need to into the future, it doesn't really matter what we're doing, as long as we're setting up the opportunity for the horse to actually become familiar with them and realize that relaxation is the right response, and then hopefully have repetition of that relaxed response to that aversive stimuli. Otherwise, we tend to sort of set the horses up to failure, and we tend to train the nervous system in the wrong response, which is sensitization, unfortunately. And what we can often end up doing is we end up seeing horses that won't move their feet, which is good, which is the right response when they experience a new stimulus, but they are incredibly tense. We often see it with an arching of the neck, very pointed ears forward, eyes very wide, and often are leaning backwards as well, because this indicates that they don't understand what they need to do in response, but they are experiencing a huge flight response. So it's really important. The takeaway message from this is you have to give your horses processing time with the new stimulus. If it's something you can control, make sure you set them up for success by making sure you can control their responses, and also making sure you can control the stimulus to the degree where the horse then can start to improve when it's exposed to it. And then don't change the stimulus too frequently on it. so that it can become familiar with the idea that these new and unusual stimuluses are actually okay, and they're not going to be a threat, and they won't constantly be elevating the horse's level of nervous system arousal, not unlike people living in a traumatic environment that they have no control of. All right, you have a great day. Happy training, and let's always aim for relaxation.